Great. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order if you'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Mr. Henkins, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Ms. Regola Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes.
I would call for the approval of minutes of the October 19th regular meeting, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola Dye. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any questions, changes? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola Dye?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes,
Dr. Bennett?
Yes.
motion carried. Thank you. All right, comments of board members. Dr. Bennett, would you like to go first?
Well, I'd just like to welcome I'd just like to welcome everyone this evening. And I'm sorry I have to be remote, but I have some surgery coming up and had to quarantine until that happens on Wednesday. So Mr. Cedar was kind enough to work this out. So I'm very grateful. And I want to thank all our teachers and bus drivers and everyone who's helping to keep all of our students safe and healthy. And I just appreciate all the teachers who are working so hard to make sure that students keep their masks on the way they're supposed to, and to do everything in their power to keep us all safe. So thanks to everyone for all the hard work that you're doing. And Mr. Cedar, I know you have been in contact with our public health director and with other superintendents, and you're going to keep us updated. So thank you for doing that as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Regola Dye.
Thank you. Good evening, and to those who are able to be here, thank you for coming. In these unprecedented times, there's sometimes little to say except thank you to community, staff, parents, grandparents, and all who have worked so hard, especially outside of the school setting, because what you do outside of the school setting helps us in the school setting. When you have your children wear a mask when they're out and about, when you wear your mask out and about, when you are social distancing, when you are making sure that you wash your hands and your children do so, we are also maintaining to keep the virus out of our schools as best we can. So thank you so much for doing that. It's so valuable. Thank you.
And Mr. Workman.
Again, thank you, everyone, for attending this evening. A lot's already been said, and I'd just like to echo that as well. I think in times like this, we all need to be leaders, and by setting an example of, practicing wearing masks, social distancing, washing of hands, we all need to do that. Unfortunately, it seems that things have taken a turn for the worse again, and we've talked about it many times. We'll get through it, but it's going to really take an effort to do so. But I'd like to thank the staff, Mr. Cedar, teachers, bus drivers. We're all working through this together. So thank you very much.
And Mr. Thompson.
So as you can tell, this COVID situation, it weighs heavy on everybody's mind across our nation and world, quite frankly, but to everything that's been said with our administration and teachers and all the support people and all the effort that goes into it, that doesn't fall deaf on us. We are, a lot of people like to use this phrase, we're all in this together, but we are whether we want to be or not. We're all in this together. I'd like to shift gears a little bit though, and try something a little different. So I'd like to call out some folks. Recently, my new health kick is to go to the beautiful facilities we have out here and during the noon hour and walk the outdoor track while we have sunshine. And it's been pretty cool to go out there it's been cool, but it's been pretty interesting to go out there during the noon hour and watch a gentleman named Rich Schumann work really hard to make sure that our grounds look tremendous. And obviously we have people across our school district who work really hard to take care of our facilities. And so I don't want to miss anybody, but I specifically got a chance to see him out there mowing every day and blowing the grass and doing the different things that you would want when you have a multi-million-dollar facility that is one of the best best around. And then I'll call out Nate Hunt and Mike Fuller while they were off the other day. They were at the baseball field mowing, moving dirt, doing some landscaping things and so on and so forth. So I just appreciate, I know COVID is the number one thing on our minds, but just observing others and what they're doing and the little things that make a difference. And so I went up and said something to some of them, and every single one of them said, we have something to be proud of, and we want to stay on top of it and make sure that we do the best we can. So a little different than things we were just talking about, but.
Very well deserved, though. Thank you for acknowledging that. And I would echo what Mr. Workman, Mrs. Regoladai, Dr. Bennett, and Mr. Thompson has said, that getting through this and to the point where we are right now has been a total team effort. And I appreciate every player on the team, because it's, as the old saying goes, there's not an I in team unless you hunt for one. And there has been no I in this team. So greatly appreciate it. I know the teachers have gone above and beyond, making sure our students are safe, the bus drivers as well. And I know a lot of teachers are doing double duty. So we appreciate, Darcy, please extend our thanks to your team, that it's not going unnoticed, and it is greatly appreciated to keep us up and operating. And then I would just again like to call out and ask that we continue to keep in mind our student who is still hospitalized and making slow but some progress, that we continue to keep Delaney and her family in your thoughts as well. So with that, Mr. Cedar, thank you for all you've done, and I'll turn it over to you for a bit.
Well, thank you. I apologize to our watchers or listeners out there. You're not seeing us quite live. Dr. Bennett's live, and it's always a great face to see. You'll get to follow along with our agenda tonight, but actually seeing us live, you won't get a chance to do that tonight. So we apologize for that. Under reports and public participation, we have postponed our presentation for tonight from the Academic Booster Club. They're going to come back and share at perhaps a bit more appropriate time to some of the things that the Academic Booster Club is doing, and we look forward to that.
And we do not have a representative for student government. Mrs. Nesbitt, anything you would like to share or say to us at this time? No. And Mr. Lang is not here. And Mrs. Rose, was there any public participation? Yes, all right. And I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Sears.
We have no board items for discussion, no additions and deletions tonight. Under superintendent's report, I do have some items for information. I do have a COVID update. It seems appropriate, so I'm going to open this link up here. It is shared in your board agenda for your review as well. We'll let it load up here. All right, I'm gonna move Dr. Bennett there just a little bit. I don't know if you felt me moving you over to the left there, Dr. Bennett, but we did. So as you take a look at the board update, I wanted just to share a little bit about our notification system update. We have done some adjustments to that. So now we're sending an email letter is sent to the parents or guardians of the school in which a positive case attends or works within 24 hours. So we're physically sending those email notices out to all parents and guardians at the specific building. A copy of the email letter is posted on the COVID dashboard by building and date. And so if you go to our COVID dashboard, you can find the parent guardian notification, click on it, you'll see all of the notifications that we've sent out via email. The other thing we've also done is we've made a copy of the dashboard at the time we made the announcement. So we're keeping kind of a record, a snapshot of that dashboard at that particular time, so you can kind of see it, how it changes as time goes on. Again, within 24 hours, we're updating the COVID dashboard. I know a lot of folks are going in and looking at that periodically when we receive a positive case. The dashboard itself does indicate whether it's a student or a staff member. It also indicates the building in which that student or staff member is located. And you'll notice when we update it, we timestamp it. So today's update was timestamped, I believe, around 10 something this morning. And so we'll continually update that to keep as current as we can relative to that information. At the very beginning of the updates, we did a Knox alert, and we sent it every time there was an update. And we just found ourselves sending out a Knox alert to the entire district every single time when it felt more appropriate to be more specific for the building in which it directly impacted. But anybody at any time can go on, they can look at the dashboard, they can see the email letters that are there. All right, so the current dashboard information as of right now, today, we have 3 active student cases. We have 6 active staff cases. I tried to do our best job at estimating quarantine. We really don't keep quarantine marks on a regular basis. It's just so difficult to try to keep. The health department just is overtaken with many of the things that they do, the very important things. So we don't get quarantine updates. What we end up doing is parents call in and they're absent. We'll ask them, are you in quarantine? We'll get yes and no. Sometimes quarantines come from other counties. And so it's really hard to do that. But I really made an attempt this morning to try to go in and do the best I could. Met with our district nurse, and we came up with a number of around 68 students or staff who are currently in some sort of a quarantine scenario. Again, it's a hard thing to do on a regular basis. So the dashboard as of, I guess it was 10:15 this morning, that reflects those current numbers that I shared with you. You'll notice in gray are active staff. So I have 2 staff members at Dan Emmett and 1 student. I have nobody at Columbia, nobody at the Digital Academy, nobody at East. We have 1 high school student, and then you'll see staff is in the gray as you go across to Pleasant Street Middle School, Twin Oak, and Wiggin Street. And again, this changes almost regularly because as soon as names go up, sometimes names come off. You know, as of 10:14 this morning, we were able to take 3 Columbia students off because they came out of their isolation period and were back in school. So this is a pretty fluid kind of a document. We do put up here that we have about 3,800 students. We have about 540 staff members. And so we do have some staff percentages there as well. So I think what you're looking at there is as numbers continue to really climb, not only nationally, statewide, even in Knox County, you know, so far we've been blessed to keep our numbers in a more positive state. Now, what this will not share with you, which is important for you to understand, is these are positive cases. So we do have staff members and students who are in quarantine. We have staff members who are being tested. And if a staff member is being tested, we ask them to stay home, and we work really hard to find substitutes so that they can stay home until we find out a result. And therein becomes a little bit more of the challenge. So while you see just about 6 staff members up there, we probably have another 10 or so who are in some sort of a testing kind of a situation that they're not here at school either. So wanted to give you just kind of an update with that. I've been asked about this, so we went back and did some looking, cumulative cases. So from the time we started the dashboard, we have had 15 students who have been positive cases at Mount Vernon City Schools. We've had 13 staff members. I've listed those out there by building for you as well. You'll notice the high school probably has our highest degree of student positive cases. And interestingly enough, it has one of the lowest high school staff member cases. And then of course you can kind of look across the board. Now these are positive confirmed cases. Right now, knock on wood, but East hasn't had anybody, and we hope certainly that that stays that way. But thought I would just share those cumulative case numbers. they just kind of give you an idea where we've been through this whole thing. I decided to take a look because I was really curious about student attendance. So I went back 4 weeks and looked at student attendance. It's based on days. And so obviously you're seeing Monday is the light green, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So as you look over here, about 3 weeks ago, Monday we were right just above 300 for the district. We peaked on a Wednesday and then we came down. Anybody know what this day was right here? If you could guess, 10:30. Well, this happened to be our kind of Halloween holiday fest kind of dress up days. And so attendance went up or absenteeism went down on that particular day. But what you're noticing is, we're still staying pretty level, maybe a slight increase. And our highest day obviously was last Wednesday. That was just prior to parent-teacher conferences on Thursday and Friday. So I don't know if that's indicative. And then of course, here's Monday again. And so you'll notice that. I did the same for staff to give you a sense for where staff is here. And I went all the way back. I think what you'll notice a lot about staff members is Mondays and Fridays tend to be those days when lots of appointments or absences or personal days come into effect. And so you kind of see that you're up here anywhere from about 27 here, dropping down into the 20s. We had a really big day here 2 Fridays ago. And then of course, this was parent-teacher conference week. And now we're back on a Monday. So it kind of gives you an idea. And the reason I'm showing you some absences is maybe for the next slide. So there are some considerable challenges and considerations we have as we move forward. Folks often will ask, well, what's the decision maker? What means we go red or we stay or we don't and so we try real carefully to come up with some metrics that we take a look at. Obviously, the Knox County alert levels are really important to us because those show us things like hospitalization and they show us recent histories. And, if you look today, Knox County cases are continuing to grow, and certainly that's a concern. Knox County did go red last week on Thursday, and it's the first time we've been, I think, red during the entire alert system. And so certainly we're cognizant of that. Trust me, the day we went red on Thursday, we had a superintendent's meeting and we all met with the health department on Friday just to take a look at all of our data from each one of our schools and tried to compare it to data that's going on not only in Knox County, but statewide. Another metric we'll continue to use is 20% of student absenteeism by building or district. In this case, we are going to count illness and quarantine. So those who are ill and those who are in quarantine. And once we reach kind of that 20% threshold, that's kind of that trigger, that mechanism that says, we need to think about what our next steps might be. Transportation, believe it or not, we transport nearly 50% of our student population, or nearly 2,000 students. And if we would happen to have something occur in the transportation department, it would certainly definitely impact us. And 25% of that group is where we start to really get concerned. And when you think of a transportation staff of 27 employees, you're looking at 5 or 6. If 5 or 6 employees went, in some sort of a quarantine or even a case positive, we would find it really difficult to do our normal transportation. And we'd have to be thinking about a next step. And then 20% teacher absenteeism by building and district, again, illness and quarantine. And as I stated in our community update, this is probably one of my bigger concern areas, simply because, as you well know, during this pandemic, things just happen in multiples. 2 can become 4 and 4 can become 8. And depending on where you're at, it can take over a building or even a district pretty quickly. And so we have been utilizing a bit of everybody to keep the doors open. Understaffing challenges, I put this here for a reason because I wanted to share it with you. So at the beginning of this whole thing, at the beginning of the year, we brought on some pandemic subs. Those are subs that we hired full-time to come every day to each one of our buildings, and we even have 2 at the high school and the middle school. And so when a staff member is absent, particularly a teacher in this case, they're put right into action because they're there every single day. So we start with our pandemic subs, then we go to our traditional subs. And as I told you before, our traditional sub list is not real large this year. but we'll go to that point. Then if we are still short in a particular building, we'll go to some of our title folks. We have title reading teachers and we have title tutors. We'll actually go to them and say, you know what, we need you to help us in the classroom today. And if we find ourselves still short, we'll go to intervention specialists. We don't like to do that. And certainly we have to take care of our special needs kids and all of their IEP criteria, but all hands on deck is the approach that we have to take. So we use ISs. We've actually used our social workers in a couple instances to fill in for classrooms. We could go to specials if we had to. And we also use our pandemic subs in such a way that, let's say, for instance, the pandemic sub at Columbia doesn't have to cover a class today, but boy, I'm in dire need out at Pleasant Street. Then we could call up that pandemic sub at Columbia and say, hey, we need you to come over. And we've even put on our chart here that if we had to go to our digital academy of teachers and say, we need you to come in today. So we've got kind of our list, our protocols that we're going down to try to make sure that we keep our classes supervised. That's just critically important. If we get to a point where I can't supervise the classes through all of that, we're at a point where we need to start talking about next steps. And so I just want to be very open and candid with you related to that. Some things I've heard about timely notices, you know, as more and more people are getting tested, the test lag time continues to grow. It was really good there for a while between, 2 to 3 days. Now we're looking at 3 to 5 days. So you can imagine that if a teacher is going to get tested and we're saying, hey, we want you to stay home until we can get back a result, sometimes that's automatically that teacher's out for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. That's not counted in the active cases list, but I've got to find subs for that. So that's taking longer, trying to keep our teachers and waiting for results. The health department is doing a great job, but honestly, they're being overwhelmed as well. And that's no fault of theirs. When you see the Knox County numbers and the tracing, I mean, they're calling us up on Saturdays and Sundays, and we're working with them trying to make sure we're tracing things as best we can. So timely notices are important. The other thing I've always said that I really worry about is if Mount Vernon City Schools or any individual building or a classroom would have to change or go remote, red, for a period of time, I want to try to do the best we can to give a good notice. And that's not always easy because these things can creep up. I mean, I'd love to be able to give, considerable time for parents to be able to make the adjustments to childcare or daycare. And so we want to make sure we try to honor that, but yet some of these might take place in a rather quicker format, perhaps as time goes on. Some other challenges we're facing, traditional and digital student requests. As you can only imagine, as this thing kind of seesaws back and forth, we're getting some parents who, quite frankly, are going, you know what, I'm getting nervous. I want to send my kids to digital. And we have at the beginning of the year and at the 9 weeks where we kind of had an intent, and we did all of our staffing based upon those intent forms. And so actually during the second 9 weeks, I moved 4 teachers from Digital Academy back to the classroom because at that time we had a lot of parents and students who wanted to come back to school. Now what we're having is a little bit of a nervousness here, understandably so, and they're asking, can they go back? And I don't know if I have the staffing for them to go back without major changes. And believe it or not, we're still getting back some who are in traditional or in Digital Academy who are just continuing to struggle. And they really need to come back because they're not doing well there. But yet in some classrooms, it's hard to bring them back because I'm maxing out at 24 and 25 students per classroom. And the only way to reduce that is to perhaps bring a Digital Academy teacher back. So those are challenges I just want the board to understand and to know. And then the last thing I have here before I just finish up with this section, extracurricular activities. As the county went red, there's been a greater emphasis on trying to reduce large gatherings. And the health department has really worked well with the schools and some of these special events and variances and putting in safety protocols to have, let's say, that concert, but just for 2 parents, as long as we're spread out. And we so appreciate that flexibility, but as we've gone red, it's getting a bit more difficult. And so we're going to be talking about things here in the future about high school extracurricular, middle school extracurricular, elementary extracurriculars, and what about our outside groups? We have a lot of elementary youth outside groups that use our facilities, and we love the fact that they use our facilities. But as we kind of head to this holiday season, we may have to make some tough decisions to say bringing 100 kids in here on a Sunday is maybe not the best idea. And so those are challenges. Not that we don't want those kids to enjoy those opportunities and be a part of that. They need that. But we need to be willing and ready to be flexible. I know the governor is coming on tomorrow. He's got some things I believe he's going to share. We get to hear little snippets sometimes ahead of times. It's my understanding that he's going to slow some things down a little bit. Although he came out today and he said he wants schools to stay open. And yet there's an internal challenge, not only here in Knox County, but even within Mount Vernon City Schools. We have staff who are really concerned, and I understand that concern. And we have parents who are really concerned, and I understand that concern. And yet, we know the importance of schools staying open and what that means to our community and what that means to our kids. So I feel like we're walking this tightrope balance, and we can't please everybody. And I think you're going to hear the governor say tomorrow that while they're taking small incremental steps, it's important for us to do our best to try to stay open. And so in my community plea a little bit on Friday, that update is we need the community's help, as a couple of the board members mentioned earlier. I mean, most everything we've seen from a school perspective for positive cases feels as though it's come in from the outside in, not inside the school and out. Now, could that eventually change? Certainly, and we need to be very cognizant of that. So that's kind of the COVID update for what it's worth. Does anybody have any questions or comments you want to share related to that?
I'll just make one comment. I often take a look at the dashboard, and that's very helpful. And I mean, I appreciate that. It's kept up very timely. That's some really good information.
I have a question. In regard to the 20% student absenteeism by building or district, when we would make a decision what to do you think that it would be immediately to hybrid, or would we just wait on that data to see what the governor says?
I appreciate your question, and where would we fall back to? I've often been asked, hey, if we would have just stayed hybrid, we wouldn't be having these issues. And I don't really know that I agree with that, because at that point in time, the whole county, the state, was in kind of this yellow learning, this yellow mode, this alert indicator. The whole state began to go up, and so did our numbers go up. Now, you could make the assertion that we brought in more students, but again, all of the information we have feels like it's coming from outside in versus inside out. So do I think that going hybrid, in this case, going back to hybrid, would make that much of a difference? I think we could maintain a little bit more social distancing, which would be good. I don't think that 6 feet would have made any difference with all of the outside cases that came in. I think we're probably to a point where if we were going to make another move, it would probably be to remote, which would be our red learning mode. For whatever period of time we felt like we needed to be there. Now, I will say that there are districts all over the state of Ohio having these conversations. Some are, I know a district just to our north, they started in remote today for 2 weeks to get them past the Thanksgiving break. I know there are some who are contemplating going red from Thanksgiving break to Christmas. That winter holiday season, which is a 3-week break, thinking maybe we can navigate that. Trust me, those are things we've all thought about and considered. We've talked about it with my colleagues, also with the health department. And so while none of those are certainly off the table, it's certainly something to have a discussion about. The one thing that we do hear time and time again are these breaks or these holidays. It just happens to be the time where spread becomes a little bit more infectious. And generally you see about a 2-week lag time between the end of that holiday and then, moving kind of into the future. So, I mean, you could certainly have a conversation about Thanksgiving to, the winter holiday or Christmas time. But if you came back on January 4th, you might not notice that kind of Christmas, New Year's kind of repercussions until maybe a week or two later. And so you just try to navigate those as best you can, or do you just stay the status quo until we meet one of those indicators? I don't, the long answer, Mary, to your question.
No, that's excellent. Thank you.
Which just reiterates, there is no clear answer to any of this.
There really is. And I know if people are waiting upon the governor to make some sort of declaration like he did in the spring, based on what I heard today and kind of what I'm hearing, I don't know if it's going to come down that way. I mean, if there are strong recommendations one way or another, we'll certainly we'll consider all of those. Do I think a mandate's coming? At this point, I just don't know if I think that a mandate's coming. I will say that if we would go purple as a county, I probably would find myself coming to you and saying, we need to go remote. And let's just hope we don't go purple. But with the numbers the way they are, I mean, again, the state right now topped 8,000, I think, again, for the third or fourth straight day. And again, 2 can become 4 and 4 becomes 8, and it just magnifies. So we've got to be flexible. Any board members have any thoughts about some of those plans that people put out? Is there a feeling like, let's just keep going while the numbers are good and while we can maintain our classrooms? Any thoughts one way or another?
I'm a news junkie, so I keep up on a lot of the different data that's coming through. And all of the health experts that I've heard speaking about this in schools have indicated that the data shows that schools are not the source of the spread. That is coming from other gatherings outside of the school setting. And I think it's just a tribute to everything that the public schools have done, the preventative measures, and the teachers and the staff, what they've done, and the leadership we've had. I mean, it's been invaluable.
I completely agree. I've been following those same type news reports and reading anything that I can get my hands on, and it's, and even the numbers that you put up there would say that we're doing well in spite of it all, but doing very, very well. So I think we have to just stay the course for now.
The one thing I think that is certainly attributable in a positive way to our students and our staff is when they come to school, they're masking up. They're taking some of those necessary precautions. And, that doesn't necessarily belie some of the places that I go on a regular basis where maybe that isn't taking the place as maybe we would all like it to be. So we know that when they're in school, they're doing some of the proper things. The other challenge is we are entering cold season. We're going to be entering the flu season in January, and it's so hard to tell the one from the other. And that too can be a challenge. And the last item I have, if we don't have anything else there, are board policy reviews. We have 2 policies for your review: cost principles and procurement of federal grants and funds for your review. Under recommended items for board approval tonight, we have just 1 item for home and community school student participation in athletics pending completion of the required paperwork, and you'll see those presented there for you.
All right. I would entertain a motion for approval of the home community school students.
So moved.
Mr. Thompson, Dr. Bennett, would you second that?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Any questions? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Goladai.
Yes.
Mrs. Getz.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Bennett, I have items for information under curriculum and instruction. Would you like to me to pull one up to share?
Are you talking about the student liaison report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the first one, I'm not going to spend much time, but board members may like to read that. It's regarding how to assess students this year. And the Council of Chiefs State School Officers had a webinar Monday, and they agreed that schools should conduct large-scale summative assessments this year because it's vital to understanding the gaps and disparities, especially this year in educational services. Since some schools have been closed or hybrid. Schools are advised by the state educational leaders and assessment professionals to use formative or informal, ongoing, and flexible testing to help identify students' academic strengths and needs, and to collect others' accountability data points such as attendance, which I noticed we're doing, so that's great. The challenges are the concerns about safely and equitably administering high stakes assessments this school year and proctoring valid tests. So they're recommending flexible testing windows, possibly using samplings of students instead of all students, developing assessments that are given remotely, and then separating assessments and accountability systems so that assessments are not used to penalize or promote districts. And then the second article was really interesting. It's about students learning about finances on an obstacle course. And there's a gentleman in Charleston, West Virginia, who's an accountant, and his name is Davis. And he teaches a free online financial literacy workshop for children. And he brings he brings the abstract concepts to life with an obstacle course. And his philosophy is that you're never too young to learn to budget your money. And the children learn teamwork, and they identify their emotions that are related to spending. And they discern between their wants versus their needs, all while climbing up a knob wall or jumping into a ball pin or racing through tunnels. And as one student participant said, I got food, housing, savings, a lot of things I'll need in life. So I thought that was pretty interesting that an accountant took that upon himself to develop that free program for students. And we know that financial literacy is something that's being required, and this would give kids a head start on it. So any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. I have just one item in this section for board approval tonight. It's actually a carryover item from the previous board meeting where we had some discussion about if the trip was canceled, how would students be reimbursed? And Dr. Bennett was correct at last board's meeting that they're very clearly state inside of their documentation, if it's canceled, you can use it as a waiver, but to get a return of your finances, it's going to be at a much reduced rate. I will say that after talking to Mrs. Keaton, they're not really looking to add more students to this trip. So it's really trying to accommodate the students who had signed up in the past. But if more students would come on board, they would make it very understood that by signing up, this is the risk, I guess, for lack of a better term, that you would take if you weren't willing to take a waiver or a voucher. So we have that one overnight extended field trip to England with a Paris extension to hopefully take place on June 11th.
I would entertain a motion for this overnight extended trip. Thank you, Mrs. Regola Diane. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any questions?
No question, but just a comment that God willing, if we have that vaccine when they're indicating, then we have a good chance of our children being able to do this and many other things.
That would certainly be wonderful.
That would be nice. All right. Any other questions, concerns? Hearing none, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Goloday,
Yes.
Mr. Workman,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Getzman,
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
All right, motion carried. All right, fiscal services, Mr. Hankins.
Unless the board has any desire to look at the just general report, We'll skip that and jump right into the forecast.
Everybody okay with that? All right.
Pretty boilerplate. Mr. Cedar, if you would go to the page 22, which is the page that they're sort of used to looking at.
Okay. Trying to get over here. There we go. Let's see. Where am I at here? 10, 11, 22?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is probably what you're used to seeing. There's lots of information in the report, obviously, that you're welcome to look at and ask me today or email me if you have any questions. If you would scroll down just a little bit. I wanted to point out a couple things. I'll stand up for this if you want to look up here or if you're looking on your screen. This is the current fiscal year we're operating in. Unfortunately, we're projecting a deficit of a little over 800,000, meaning we're going to be cutting into our savings as we finish up this fiscal year. Last year, we carried over a little over 4 million. So obviously, we're going to cut that amount and have about $3.3 million carryover, which in a district our size isn't a huge amount of savings, so to speak. So obviously starting to get concerned there. Wanted to point one thing out that maybe has you wondering and tell you what my thinking is on it, and then you can ask any questions. So projecting a pretty large deficit this year, not quite as large next year, not even close. The reason for that is in anticipation of not having our state funding reduced. So going back to at least what we had before the reductions the past 2 fiscal years. Obviously, there's a new House bill coupled with a new Senate bill coupled with the House bill that could increase our state funding. Also, that big amount, the 800,000, would be helping obviously another line item, and hopefully that would be corrected and we wouldn't have as much deficit spending from that point forward. But we are getting to a place where our savings is low for a district this size, where our payroll can be, $900,000, just one. So we're going to have to start thinking about ways to either obviously increase revenue or decrease expenses. So lots of things in that report you could digest. Those are the 2 things I really wanted to point out to you. You can see it just gets worse, obviously, as we continue to deficit spend. You would probably have to just come visit me in the hospital if we get to this point. If we were carrying over $150,000 with a $900,000 payroll, I'll probably have a nervous breakdown. So
I have a feeling there'd be a couple people beside you. So not alone.
obviously
in that
lots of
case.
information in that report. Feel free to look it over. Let me know if you have questions or if you have any now. And if there are none, I'll read the donations, but
I would just mention that, again, you've heard this before, but we've been cut about $1.5 million over the past 2 years. We got a little bit of that back in some CARES money. And Gary and I probably started a year ago with cuts. And we started really through attrition, primarily, the opportunity to not fill some positions. And I think we figured out kind of a ballpark amount of what that was, didn't we, Gary? Was it around $400,000 or so of just, ways to reduce, ways to not hire folks back through attrition. So we're trying all those little things to try to make that stretch as far as we can. There is some interesting legislation right now out there called the Fair Schools Funding Act. It's gaining a little bit of traction. We'll see where that goes. That certainly will impact us more at a biennial moment. We're kind of in the middle of a 2-year biennium. And so, if that would pass or some shape or form of that would pass, the early simulations look like they could have a more positive impact on the district and our finances there.
in addition, I believe there were 6 staff members, one in the administrative realm that obviously in this building, Miller retired. We didn't replace that. We filled it internally. 4 certificated positions, 1 classified. In addition, as you know, we've cut building budgets, which didn't make us very popular with principals. We've cut even library budgets, which we don't like to do. That's not what, we don't look forward to making those decisions, but we've tried. And those savings we're in the $500,000 range, and we continue to try to sharpen our pencil as best we can, especially during these times when the money's getting tight here. All right, I do have some donations. We always appreciate our community. They're always a blessing to us. We have a donation from Faith Lutheran Church to Dan Emmett Elementary. They donated binders, dry erase markers, tissues, pencils, etc. Another donation to Dan Emmett from the Culberson family, and that was 60 backpacks. A donation from the Interchurch Social Services of Knox County to just the district in general. That was pencils and pencil cases and pouches. We had a donation from Mount Vernon Nazarene University to 3 elementary buildings, and that was 210 barriers, obviously helping to prevent the spread of COVID. So we really appreciate that donation from NAS. We had a donation from the Cocosing Valley Basketball Officials Association of a 50-inch flat screen TV to Energy Fieldhouse. Greatly appreciate that. So I'd like to thank all those people for their donations to the district.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. I would entertain a motion for the fiscal items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. And a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. Any questions or comments? I would just like to say, I know Mr. Hankins and Mr. Cedar pointed out some of the reductions that they have made, and I know that you continue to look for those ways, and that is greatly appreciated. So thank you. And to the buildings for budget cuts. I know they're not easy to take, but I appreciate their willingness to search within and do without in some cases. So, all right. I would entertain a vote.
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes. Great, motion is carried. On to business services, and Mrs. Regola-Dye.
Thank you. I'm going to overview some things, and some of it is not on the report there. But HB 305, which we've mentioned, was accepted in the House Finance Committee with some substitutions. So this is the new school funding formula. A number of superintendents and treasurers around Ohio testified in support of the bill. And OSBA held a webinar at which this bill, as well as SB 376 companion bill, was discussed. The 3 main components discussed were the base cost, the state and local share, and the categorical or add-ons for additional resources across the state. And in this bill, the base cost in the formula for educating an individual student is estimated at $7,200. HB 480 is specific for just Montgomery County, and it appropriates $1 million to the school districts that were affected by the 2019 tornado. HB 751 modifies the law regarding property tax evaluation, complaints to include tenants of the property who pay the entire amount of taxes. The Senate concurrent resolution H is urging Congress to enact the Sunshine Protection Act of 2019, which would permanently establish daylight savings time. The Ohio Controlling Board approved a request to increase appropriations authority of $150 million for the summer food service program. And then today, I received an email that OSBA is encouraging us to contact our legislators. So I did send some emails to Senators Brenner, Lehner, and Fetter. And this is regarding the Ed Choice Voucher Program. They're having a hearing tomorrow out of the conference committee. And the main points OSBA asked us to highlight where the list of eligible buildings should never include those with an overall rating of A, B, or C. The buildings must not be added to the eligibility list that were never on the original list. And the plan must not increase the performance index to 20% from the 10% currently in the law. So if you have a chance to contact anyone in the legislature tomorrow, it would be appreciated by OSBA and myself. That's it. Any questions or comments or things that you want me to relay to any of the legislators?
I will say that Ed Choice language that has come back out, that's being out of committee right now. No Knox County schools are listed on that new simulation model, which is certainly good news for all of our districts. Before, I think it impacted almost 1,220 districts or buildings. While this new proposal still has some things that we're concerned about, as of right now, it doesn't impact schools here in Knox County.
Thank you.
I have 3 items for board approval in this section. The first 2 items are what I would call kind of final change orders to Adina for the completion of the Energy Fieldhouse. You'll see those in items 4 and 5. One was to Yellow Jacket Drive, and the other ones were for permits and fees for AEP. And then finally, in item number 3, kind of an interesting surprise, last March 16th, when we went into kind of a mandated lockdown, it was right around the time of AP testing. Many of our students really rely on this AP testing for opportunities in the college level. And so we continued on with that even during that difficult time. And I know Myrna Kinnerly was really a huge part of that. AP is recognizing that nationwide, the efforts that it took for folks in individual districts to kind of pull together and get that done. So they came up with an honorarium gift, a reimbursement to those supervisors. We did meet with MVEA and made sure that this one-time stipend would be something we could approve. And it's kind of a way for AP to say a special thank you to those folks who went above and beyond during that time. So those 3 items for your approval.
I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, you call the roll.
Mr. Thompson? Yes. Mr. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes,
Dr. Bennett?
Yes,
thank you. Motion carried. Student Services.
I have one contract that I'm asking your approval for tonight. This is for SpectraCore. This may be something that you remember from last, either February or March, that we approved, I brought this to you and you approved for interpretation services. This would most likely be during IEP meetings, ETR meetings, maybe parent-teacher conferences when we have families who are not comfortable with the English language. You approved it last year and then we closed. So we never had the opportunity to use it. I've been working with the company out of Texas, and they have figured out a way for us to use this with Zoom. And that was a new thing for their company to figure out. And so they're excited to try this with us. We're excited to do this. Knox Community Hospital also uses this company. And this company was gracious enough to give us the same rate that KCH has. So they have worked really closely with us. We're excited to stay open long enough to use this. And so I would ask for your approval for this.
I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. And a second?
second,
Mr. Workman, I'm sorry. Thank you. All right. Any questions or concerns? All right. Hearing none, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mr. Workman?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
yes,
Thank you. Motion carried. On to personnel certificated staff.
At this time, no items for information. We do have a number of items for board approval. You'll see the employment of a one-year contract This is a retroactive contract as this particular teacher was kind of out of a sequence. So we're just trying to bring it back into sequence. We have some substitute teachers, supplemental contracts. There's the stipend there that we talked about previously with Mrs. Kinnerly. And we have several extracurricular activity vacancies. So those items for your approval.
I would entertain a motion for certificated staff as presented. Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. Any questions or concerns? And I would just confirm that the stipend for Myrna Kennerly is just a one-time payout and there's not two different stipends, correct?
That's correct.
Just wanted clarification. Thank you. All right, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes, thank you. All right, classified staff.
Under classified staff, no items for information, a number of items for board approval tonight. We have the retirement of two folks here, Dorothy Brown, who's been a longtime cook here at Twin Oak, is actually on leave right now, but will officially retire here in December, I believe. And Janine Davenport, who was a teacher of the district, retired at one point in time, came back to serve at Columbia as a library aide. I think she's decided that the second time go around, it's time to retire again. So we certainly wish them both the best. We have a resignation of Mo Helzer from our CRC resource officer and the transfer of Jessica Shelton. She'll be moving to the secretary of the superintendent, pending certainly the last days of Terry Strebe, my longtime assistant. And Jessica will do a great job in that role. So, and then finally, in item number 4 is the employment of a couple contracts and then some substitute contracts to finish out this section.
And I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. And a second. Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried.
I have no need for executive session unless board members would have a need for any particular item at your discretion.
Do not. Any other board member? All right, then I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola-Dye. And Mr. Thompson, a second. Okay, will you call the roll?
Ms. Regola-Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes,
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
we are adjourned, 6:59.
Thank you.